pests, vermin. That's often what the eastern gray squirrel in its black morph is thought of here in Canada, despite being quite the remarkable animal. Hopefully today, after looking at some of its chasing behaviors, you'll no longer think that way and even be inclined to go look at them and what behaviors they perform.
Squirrels are considered solitary animals, meaning that they live on their own as opposed to being in a pack or a herd. Despite this, the squirrels will often live in close proximity to one another. This will allow for the squirrels to have plenty of opportunities to steal one another's food and territory. As you can see in this clip, the squirrels will give each other a slight chase without much of an escalation happening afterwards, as opposed to, say, grizzly bears who will full on fight. This is most likely because one was attempting to defend his territory from the other, who was attempting to either steal it or steal the food underneath it.
The first thing we should ask ourselves is, why are they performing this behavior? What benefit does it have when they could be doing better things with their time? Such as eating a snack? Or taking a nap? Now this plays directly into what us humans call a cost-benefit analysis. The benefits for the squirrel is that they get to keep their food in their territory when chasing off another squirrel. The costs are that they're now susceptible to predation and may even lose their habitat because squirrels are often densely packed into an area. So if you chase one squirrel, a new guy can just come in and steal your territory.
As you're about to hear from the observations of our field biologist and his voice notes while taking the field data, the squirrels are much more accepting of one another in an open environment as opposed to under the trees. As we can see here, there's 3 squirrels in close proximity to one another, perfectly fine, but underneath those trees, 2 just chased each other.
Here's more gray squirrels. Chasing one another. There's 3 gray squirrels in very close proximity. In open plains, they seem to accept one another. But if they were to be under, say, that tree right there, they wouldn't like each other. I think it's because the trees hold acorns and stuff that they want to eat. So when one gets close to another's tree, they try to run each other off.
Hopefully that brief clip illustrated the findings of our field biologist and how the behaviors performed of the gray squirrel are context and environment dependent, or else the squirrels would waste too much energy, be susceptible to predation, and even lose their territory to an entirely different squirrel if they were to just chase one another full time.
Given that this is such an urbanized environment, we're inclined to believe that predation from foxes, coyotes, and wolves would be significantly lower than to, say, lose your territory to another squirrel if you're chasing a third squirrel off in the distance.
In this clip, you can see the squirrel is perfectly satisfied foraging near his good territory of vegetation, gaining resources to help with his survival, opposed to running every single squirrel in a 10-mile radius out of dodge. This is most likely because if he If he just makes unnecessary chases, he could lose his territory to a third male. And despite living in a heavily urbanized environment, the squirrel may very well still have a fear of foxes, coyotes, and other predators within his DNA due to the past of his ancestors, making them not want to go very far from his good, dense vegetative home.
He's moving his tail in a very interesting pattern. What could that be?
The adaptive value of this behavior is that if the squirrel has more food, it has more resources that it can then put towards reproduction and have more reproductive success if it has multiple mating opportunities. An additional adaptive benefit that we think is that if you can defend a good territory such as this with all this tree and vegetation in the way, if a predator does attempt to chase you in there, you have much more vegetation to hide within, as opposed to if you're out on the open plain, or if you have a tree, just an individual tree such as this one, you don't have much vegetation to hide from a predator. Where if you're in here in this dense vegetation, there's a lot of stuff that's in the predator's way where they can't get to you. Some of the abiotic factors that are thought to play into this is the temperature. Typically when it gets a little bit colder, squirrels will slow down a bit, not quite hibernate the way you might think of a bear hibernating, but they will significantly slow down, so they're probably less inclined to chase one another. Additionally, what we've noticed as a biotic factor is that the vegetation, when there's more vegetation, such as the squirrel being under a tree, it's more inclined to chase another squirrel, most likely because that's where its food is stored, versus in the open field, the squirrels are much more likely to allow one another to be around. This might be because if there's more squirrels around, it makes that individual squirrel less susceptible to predation because there's other squirrels around. Or it could just be that there's less food around and they don't mind each other being around when there's no food.
As you'll see here, as described in the previous clip, there's two squirrels that are complacent with one another in an open field. However, what they don't like is the crow. Now, the two squirrels would most likely be chasing one another if it was near the vegetation, because this is where they would be defending their territory, and the squirrels aren't really going to be sleeping out in the open field like this. As you can see in stark contrast to that previous clip, where the two squirrels were complacent with one another within the open field and didn't like the crows, now the two squirrels are on the same tree where they don't like each other, and the one squirrel is attempting to chase the other off his territory. As you can see, after that chase, the one squirrel is now content to go run off and find a new territory to forage or to live, and not have to put up with the other squirrel who just ran him off.
On behalf of our group, and we'll gladly speak for the squirrels, we hope you enjoyed our documentary and might even be inclined to go look at squirrels and how they perform this behavior and how it fits the context of the environment that you're in.